During today's episode, you'll get to know Annie Dickerson, founder and chief brand officer at Good Egg Investments, a co-author of the book Investing for Good, and co-host of the Life and Money Show podcast. If you don't know what a real estate syndication is, that's okay. We're going to talk all about it. It's basically an opportunity to invest a smaller amount of money, think $10,000 to $100,000, into a giant property like an apartment complex or a hotel, something that you'd almost never have access to as a single investor. So you invest alongside, say, 50 or more investors just like you to get this large investment. Pretty cool, right? So Annie and her business partner have basically taken these secret investment opportunities and helped make them available to all of us. Through that, she's been challenged with building a team, setting boundaries around her time, juggling a family and a growing business, bouncing back from burnout, and much more, all while working hard to create a trustworthy online presence. There's excellent advice in this episode, no matter what type of business you own. Annie, thank you so much for being here with me today.
It's an honor to be here with you and your listeners today, Virginia.
Thank you. Now, one thing I always start off with is I would love to hear your definition of abundance.
You know, funny enough, I was just listening to a podcast this morning about abundance from a different angle that I hadn't thought of. And they were talking about it they called it spherical abundance. So not just abundance in a linear fashion, but abundance in all these different regards, all the way around you and in all the areas of your life. And so that kind of opened my eyes to a new level of abundance. And kind of what I equate or I have equated abundance with in the past is, trust, I find, is a big part of abundance. Trusting that the universe has my back, that there's enough to go around, not just of money and resources, but time, connections in all the various areas of my life, that I trust that there's more than enough to go around, and not just for me, but for all the people in my life, people I haven't met yet. And so to me, that's kind of what abundance is. And now with spherical abundance, kind of taking that into account and adding the self-awareness to it, kind of thinking about it from all different angles.
Yeah. So go on to that for a minute. What was different about this spherical concept? Because the things that you listed, time, money, connections, those can filter into various areas of our lives, whether you're talking health or family, mental wellness, sleep, fitness. Like you could take that any direction. So then how does this spherical concept change things?
Yeah, so the spherical aspect kind of brings the manifestation piece into it through kind of normally you're thinking about linear abundance and you're thinking, okay, I want to grow a business. I want to do it this way. And I'm going to build up my business and I'm going to reach this amount and I'm going to reach these clients and this is how it's going to go. Spherical abundance is kind of loosening that up a little bit as I understand it, in that you have this you're like, I want to build a business or I want to reach this goal, but I don't know how I'm going to get there. I trust that it's going to happen somehow. And I'm neutral about how it's going to happen. And so it's not a linear progression from point A to point B. Things start to come into the field from all around. And I think that's where the spherical aspect comes in, is that it can be kind of quantum in a way.
Yeah. Okay. That's really interesting.
Right?
Okay. So from there, share with me like the way back version of you starting what is now an amazingly large online presence, big business. But take us back to how, because I know you were very thoughtful about how you created this as far as having a family and wanting freedom and free time, and what the thought process was back then and as you've built it. And then fast forward us and tell us how maybe this new concept might affect your business.
Yeah. Well, I think our paths first crossed back when our business was a baby business. It was really in the fledgling phases. And it's been such a joy to watch your business grow and you've been a big part of our business growing too. But, from the get-go, it was really so our business is around real estate syndications, which are group investments. And at the
Mm-hmm.
time when I had contemplated starting a business, first of all, starting a business was never in the plan for my life. I never wanted to do that. It was something I thought was, for other people who knew that what they were doing, not for little old me. But here's the thing is I had been investing in real estate on the side for about 10 years at this point. And, it being a landlord doesn't come without its hurdles. And with young kids at the time, I found myself with things like vandalism and theft, evictions, things that were gut wrenching things that I didn't want to have to deal with. And I never knew that there was a way to invest passively in real estate. And when I discovered real estate syndications, I thought, wait a second, how could I have never known about this? And I discovered that it was a country club investment, that for generations, that the wealthy were sharing this opportunity with other wealthy people, and they just kept it within their circles. And really, that's what ultimately got me over that hurdle of starting a business was like, this isn't right. This cannot be this way. I need to figure out some way to shout this from the rooftops. And so the business really grew from that seed of wanting to make things more fair for people. And I didn't know, funny enough, when I quit my job to start this business, I had never done a syndication before. I didn't know what was involved in starting a business or getting one off the ground. But I remember telling my friends and my mom, I said, don't worry, I'll have plenty of time to spend with you now. I'm quitting my job. I'm going to start a business. I'm going to have all the free time. It was the biggest joke because that first year, the first several years actually, I worked harder than I've ever worked in my life. But in many ways, going back to the idea of the spherical abundance and the quantum nature of this, in many ways, as I reflect back, it feels like the business came through me and not from me. And I'm sure you can relate to this. I'm sure a lot of your listeners can as well. Sometimes there's just this energy that you don't know where it comes from, but you can't do you just have to go with it. And that's how I felt when we started this business. My partner Julie and I, we both were swept up in this passion, this energy, and it felt like we were in the right place at the right time. And so fast forward to now, 6 years later, we've done over 40 syndications. We've helped thousands of investors all across the country, even around the world. A lot of them moms and women who we first set out to help. But we also help a lot of men, a lot of physicians, a lot of entrepreneurs to get their money to work for them in real estate.
Have you ever pictured yourself having your own show? Maybe it's time. This show is edited and produced by podcastabundance.com. And if you like what we're doing, we can do it for your business too. I'm Virginia Elder, and I've been helping entrepreneurs start podcasts to market their business since 2019. I coach you through branding, structuring your episodes, workflow, and recording your podcast. Then my team and I professionally edit your audio and video so that you don't have to. We'll even write your episode descriptions and titles so that when potential customers turn to Google, your show appears in their search results. Establish authority in your niche, expand your reach, and create a library of helpful content for potential and current clients, all with your own podcast. I'm here to hold your hand and make podcasting the exciting, up-leveling experience it should be, skirting you past the tech and software struggles too. Take the first step by booking a call with me using the link in the show notes or by visiting podcastabundance.com. Now, on to the rest of the show. Yeah. And I have watched you and have been lucky enough to be on the inside of it a little bit of that time, but have really watched you and Julie build basically from scratch. And it's been inspirational, to say the least. And that was one piece I wanted to ask you was, I know you set out because you're a mom, Julie's a mom, and you're both like, I want time with my kids. I want time with my family. Like, that is important to me. That is what I want. So to start a business, venture into this investment world, which may or may not have been foreign at the time, right? And then also have this very specific vision of, we are going to help other moms. And I don't know if the two of you got together and thought about, specific minority groups of moms, or like, hey, our backgrounds are this, Asian minority in the US. So like, was that a piece of the conversation? How did that all play out?
Mm-hmm. At the beginning, I think we thought it was a detriment that we were women in this male-dominated space and that we were Asians in this very white space. And we thought, okay, well, we're just going to have to work harder. And we did. We did work harder, in part because of that. But also, I think we neglected to see some of the benefits that come with being a minority on those two fronts. Sometimes in these very male dominated conversations with lenders and brokers, we come in with a female voice and all of a sudden they're very reasonable. They were yelling just a minute ago, but then all of a sudden they're more civil. And sometimes it works against us. They don't take us as seriously, but sometimes it works in our favor. And so we've had to navigate that and just come to terms with where to play that card and where to hold back.
Yeah.
But it's definitely something that we've learned along the way. And also, you mentioned the intentionality with which we built the business around, having time for family and whatnot. And honestly, we're 6 years into the business now. It wasn't until year 5 that I feel like personally I got a handle on that. The first, 4 years, I was burning the candle at both ends. I burnt out multiple times. And Julie and I had some real come to Jesus moments where we had difficult conversations, but we grew from that. And what I've learned now, if I were to start a new business now, it would be very different. I would start with a very different mindset than when I first started this business. I thought I had to do everything. Everything had to be me. I had to control everything, oversee everything. It's like the opposite of abundance, right? It was like everything had to come from me or come from Julie. We had to be in charge of it all, which was why we were so strapped for time. Because as the business grew, there was only one of each of us. But if I were to build a business now, I would be much more intentional about selecting the right team, selecting the right vendors, the partners up front to leverage the best use of my time, which is not necessarily the administrative tasks or things like that I spent a lot of time doing earlier on. So I think that skill of balancing your time and your family, as well as just prioritizing as you're growing a business, it's a skill that comes with experience and time.
Yeah. Thank you for being so honest about like, hey, those first few years were super tough. I burnt out several times. I think that's the piece that is left out of a lot of conversations. Would you take us through an example scenario, or if a specific story comes to mind, that's great, of what that looked like those early phases of doing everything, burning out? How did you get help? What woke you up? What was that kind of like struggle phase for you? And then why did that go away? Like, what changed?
Yes. Oh, yes. Well, I went through this actually probably 2 or 3 times in the first 5 years of business, but I'll walk you through the first time, which was probably one of the most toughest times in business because I had never dealt with that before. So this was, I'm sure you'll not be surprised, during COVID. And so we started our business in 2018 and it halfway through 2018. So by the time COVID hit, we were less than 2 years into the business. And all of a sudden we couldn't meet up in person anymore. So we were doing everything remote. And meanwhile, because the main way that we get paid in our business and keep the lights on is through doing real estate deals. When we close a big deal, then we get paid. And for a period of time after that, unless we have another deal, there's no more income coming in.
Mm,
And so we had to really, work with that in the early years and figure out how to have that ongoing income. And so at the tail end of 2019, because we had grown so quickly and seen such great success, people came to us because they wanted to learn what we were doing. So we thought, this is great. We'll create a coaching program, a separate stream of income that's independent from the real estate deals. And so now all of a sudden in 2020, we were building not just one, but two businesses. We had our core real estate business where we were working with individual investors to purchase these big multifamily deals. And then second, we were coaching people to create businesses just like ours. And so all of a sudden it was not just double, but something happens when you have multiple businesses, but it's like 1 + 1 = 5 sort of a thing. It was like
yes.
suddenly all this extra work. And we were remote and we had a very small skeleton team at the time. I think it was just me, Julie, one part-time admin, and then maybe a VA for a few hours here and there. And between all the coaching, as well as the calls with investors and the blog posts, the videos, all the content we were creating, it was just back to back to back. There was
Mm,
no end. Plus, we were still very much in the startup phase of growing the business. And with the magnification of everything being online versus in person, in person, when we used to get together, in person, you sit down for a meal, you talk about the family, you kind of smooth things over that way, and you kind of reestablish that human to human connection. But when you're on Zoom all the time, it's like you're in this little box and the time starts and you're like, okay, well, we have 5 minutes to catch up. Okay, now let's move into the business. Okay, what's the agenda? Okay, let's work on this first item. And it became very formal, right? And there were a lot of things that were left unsaid. And so that built up over many weeks and months. And by near the end of 2020, I was like, I had it up to here. And I was like, I'm doing so much work. I cannot handle it anymore. And we didn't have the resources to grow the team at that point. And I couldn't see a way out. I
mm,
just knew that I couldn't keep doing what I was doing. And I said,
mm,
Julie, I don't know if I can keep doing this anymore.
mm,
I think maybe I'll leave. You figure out a way to do this. And that's
mm,
honestly in that state, what I was
mm.
thinking. I was like, I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
And so she and I had a series of very deep, kind of soul level conversations.
Mhm.
And the thing about our partnership is, even when we've had tough moments, which we've had a lot, just like in any partnership,
Mhm.
marriage or otherwise, you have a lot of challenges, but it's because you're holding a mirror up to each other and you're helping each other to see your blind spots and your gaps and your opportunities for growth. And that's not always easy. And so in that in that period of time, we had a lot of those conversations trying to figure out the future of the business, how we might carry on, how I might stay in the business, what it would look like if I left, all those really tough conversations. And we got to a point where we had settled on a path forward that would involve me leaving the business. But she said, next week we had signed up for the online version of Date with Destiny with Tony Robbins. And she said, next week is this event. Maybe we just, we've gotten to this point in our conversation. Maybe we just pause for a moment and we just attend this event together because we were going to do it anyway. And then we'll come back after the event to see if anything's changed. And it was perfect timing. It always is. Comes back to the abundance, the trust factor of knowing that everything happens for a reason at the right time. And we went to this event. And Tony is just, online or in person, he's just larger than life. And it was a 6-day event. Like very long days, it goes to like midnight some days. But it basically, what that event does is it helps you go down to the studs of who you are as a human being. And what it did for us in our partnership is helped us to reestablish that human to human connection that we had lost over the many months of being on Zoom. And we realized it's kind of like we got back to why we first got together in the first place. And we said, oh my gosh, can't believe we lost sight of this. This is what we've wanted to build. We've seen so much success, which is a good thing, but it's also been tough. We were able to have those conversations from a place of grace and gratitude for each other and just appreciation rather than a place of lack. And so that made a world of difference. And so after that event, we actually said, you know what? I think that our tanks are filled back up. Let's give this another go. And to Julie's credit, she gave me some space to kind of rethink and kind of take a break a little bit to rethink what I wanted my new role to be. And we also looked at how we could grow the team in a smart way, not overspending, but really pinpointing exactly how we could bring people on the team in an economical way. And so within the next few months, I was ready to jump back in. And so and then that began the new phase. I jumped back in as COO, Chief Operating Officer, which is a whole nother can of worms that led to another burnout at a later stage.
Oh, no.
But it was cyclical. And with everyone, I learned a lot about not only the business and how I operate in our partnership, but who I am as a human being, my communication style, and this journey of building this business and being an entrepreneur has helped me grow so much more and so much faster than anything else in my life.
Well, thank you for taking us through that because, yes, for anyone listening who is in business with a partner, just being aware that some of those very intense conversations are pretty much required to make it work long term. It's not just magic, like, oh, we're great together.
Right.
We never fight. Like this, the couples that say that are the ones who you're most concerned
Yep.
about. So it's the same thing in business. But then also just being really real with us about the possibilities of burning out. I love the timing that this event played out and the way these, you were having these tough conversations. You were already signed up for this Tony Robbins event, which if anybody has been to those or hasn't, those events, no matter which one you choose, they are intense and long and deep and you're going to cry and it's work to go to those.
Yeah.
It's wonderful, but it's work.
He had the host of American Ninja Warrior, that show, happened to be an attendee, and he was chosen to share on one of the, Tony does these like laser coaching sessions, and he was chosen because he volunteered, and he came on screen, this big macho man. He's got all these like trophies and whatnot in the background in his office. And he's clearly very alpha dude, but
Yeah.
within seconds, Tony had him down to tears. I mean, it was magic. It was magic to watch.
And not that everybody just needs a good cry, but there is an important piece of breaking down to the core of
Mhm.
why you're here, what your destiny is, right? Like,
Yeah.
what's the whole entire point of what you're doing? And I think that's
Yes.
so important. What would you suggest? Because I'm hearing, even for a solo business owner, say there's no partnership, but say you are getting burnt out, you're lost, you're in the weeds, you're like, it's either 100% or
Right.
0%, right? It's like I'm all in and I'm going
Yep.
till midnight every
Mhm.
day, or I'm out and I
Mhm.
quit and I'm just going to
Yeah.
go get a job or something. So let's say there's not a Tony Robbins event to sign up for. What do we do? What is the better answer?
Yeah. So I mentioned I burned out a couple of times, and each time we had those deep, intense conversations.
Mhm.
The last time that I was about to burn out, third time's a charm.
Yeah.
The last time that I was about to burn out, I tried something different. And maybe this is something that might help somebody who's in this situation. And it's going to sound so basic, so rudimentary, so simple, but when you're in the depths of that, sometimes it just doesn't occur to you that it's a possibility. So this was at a time, actually about a little over a year ago, and we were so successful, which has there's two sides of that coin, right? We were so successful, we were growing so much, we had all these coaching clients, we had a ton of we were growing the team. So on paper, everything was great. Behind the scenes, I was working like a madwoman once again. And I remember looking at my calendar and thinking, wow, 7 back to back meetings a day is a good day. I was like, today I only have 7.
What?
And I was like, what is this madness? I'm like, wait a second. This isn't how it's
No.
supposed to be. I'm supposed to be the business owner. I'm supposed to own the business, and other people are supposed to do all the meetings. What is this?
Oh, man.
And Julie and I were at the same place at that point. We were both super stressed out, and we were taking on more work than we wanted to. And we signed up for a coaching program, but you almost don't need to, because really what we took away from that coaching program is this simple thing. And we had always thought, okay, so we'll build up to a certain point and then we'll take a break. We'll take a vacation, or we'll take a pause from the business. We'll not grow for a period of time. But we have to get to this threshold first. And what this coaching program taught us was actually just to take small breaks along the way, simple as that sounds. But I remember that first week, and in part because I had an accountability coach. When you don't have an accountability coach and you're just trying to work these small breaks into your own schedule, sometimes it's easy to just say, nah, I don't need that.
Yeah, I'm
But
good this week.
yeah, but because I knew I would have to have that call with my coach, and they would ask me, did you do this? Did you try this? And I was like, okay, I'll give this a shot. And so simple as it was, this is all I did. If I ended a meeting 2 minutes early, instead of seeing what else I could knock out, I would step away from my computer, go outside, stand in the sunshine, and just take a breath. That's literally all it was. And just those small moments, and it was just maybe once or twice a day, if that, it did this funny thing. I think it activated something in my subconscious that was like, oh, yeah, this is what we're here for. This is that reconnection to life, to the universe, to nature, to whatever it is. And it gave me this perspective that all of a sudden I was like, wait, I'm not supposed to be the one buried under all of this. I'm supposed to be the one managing all of this. And so it helped me to prioritize things in a way that I had just kind of I was just at the whim. I was almost a victim of my calendar before. I was just like, well, all these things are on my calendar. Nothing I can do about it. And after I started taking those little breaks, I was like, wait, I want more of this. I want more of these moments. How can I have more of these types of moments? So then I started to think, okay, this meeting that's here, does this really need to be a meeting? Could this be just a quick, like I record a video and then they give me feedback? Could this one be moved? Could this one be shortened? And it started to help me to get resourceful and to get creative around my schedule. And then as I did, I built more and more of those breaks in, and suddenly that's where that balance came in.
Yeah. Oh, that's so powerful. Thank you. And you're right. Like it sounds so simple. Like, why aren't we doing this anyway? But that's how I too operate. I don't know if it's driven or if it's a personality thing, but it is the like 100 or nothing. I have 2 extra minutes. Like maybe there's one email I can respond to or something. I'm like digging, like, what is the one thing I can do super fast? And that's ridiculous.
I know. And wait, let me share that. This is going to be so ridiculous. Okay, so part of this whole journey is I manifested this house with a view. We live in the Bay Area, and it's almost impossible to get a house with a view. But through a lot of manifestation work, I actually, we live in this beautiful home. We moved here about a little over 2 years ago. We're in the Berkeley Hills. We have sweeping views of the Bay Area. I can see the Golden Gate Bridge from the hot tub in the backyard. It's just like
Amazing.
nuts. But even with all of that, get this, okay?
Okay.
I was spending, so right now, as we're recording, I'm in what I call my podcast studio, which is actually a closet in our guest room that's been, I've got like the green screen and mic and all set up, right? But it's literally a closet. It does have a small window, but it is a closet. And I used to spend upwards of 8 hours a day in here, taking back to back meetings and not going out to see
Oh,
this beautiful view that we had.
oh.
And I would just, and the blinds would be down on this one window that I have because the light is more even that way, of course.
Mhm.
All these little things, I look back and I'm like, who was keeping me in that box? Me.
Yeah.
I was keeping myself in that box. I did that to me. Nobody else made me sit
Mm.
here in this closed off closet for 8 hours a day. That was a choice that I made that
Yeah.
led to those periods of burnout. And it's hard to see that when you're in the thick of it. But in
Mhm.
hindsight, I'm like, ah, duh,
Mhm.
of course.
Absolutely. Ugh. And that's the same thing where in business you discover a new thing, or let's say you start a podcast or you do something and it feels big when you start it. But after you're in it for a little while, you look back and go, why didn't I start this a long time ago? Like, literally, no one was barring me from doing this. Why didn't I start speaking on stage years before I actually did? Or, like, whatever the question is, like, we just hold ourselves back. And I think the continuous question for a business owner is like, how am I holding myself back today? And what can I do about it?
Yeah, that's such a powerful question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you. Sounds really stupid or like dumb, but I love in the morning. I'm in Texas, and so our summers are very, very hot. But I love getting a cup of coffee and going outside like early in the morning and like just messing around. And like, we don't have a formal garden, but you just the yard. And
Yeah.
I'll pull weeds or
Yeah.
I'll do whatever. I'm just
Yes.
dinking around back there. It makes
Yep.
no difference. No one else sees it except me and my
Right.
family. We don't throw big parties. But if I could just hang out there with my coffee and the
Mhm.
sunshine early in the morning for like an hour, I am such a different person.
Yes.
Such a different
Yes.
person. And I can face all the challenges so much easier.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And that speaks to abundance kind of in a different way because it's like you have it all in you already. It's not like you have to go external to like find all this energy and these skills and whatnot. It's already within you. And it's just about being intentional to connect with that.
yeah. Well, and, you know, fenced off, closed in backyard or sweeping views, it doesn't matter if you don't use them.
Right?
So
Amen to that.
get out there.
Yep.
So, in all of that, you mentioned blogs, podcasts. We have talked about, we've seen each other in different speaking engagements on stage, and we've kind of been cheering each other on for a few years. So, you are someone who, almost more than anyone else I know, understands the power of an online presence and the necessity almost these days for an omnipresence on all the platforms and all the places. And this goes back into this whole burnout thing, like that feeling that you have to be everywhere on all the time, on every platform. You have to respond to every comment. That can very quickly lead to burnout for a lot of business owners. So, how have you done all the things? Because people are going to look you up. They're going to see all these blogs, this podcast, all this amazing work as far as videos and everything. How can we operate from a place of abundance and yet still do all these things? Hopefully avoid that burnout piece.
Right. Right. Well, I'll go back to when we first were getting the business off the ground, because even though we knew the importance of being everywhere online, especially with what we do, because we're asking people to invest 10, 20, $50,000 with us sight unseen, right? They've never met us in person. For the vast majority of our investors, they've never shook our hands, they've never talked to us. And so, how do they have that confidence and that trust to wire $50,000 to us and trust that we're not going to take it and just run with it? And so we knew that we had to be everywhere. We had to make ourselves available. We had to let people know that we were real people. But we were also, when we were first getting this off the ground, we knew that if we tried to do too much all at once, it's like a house of cards, it would just collapse. And so we started with what we were most passionate about and what we knew we could do well, which was blogging. At the time, we didn't even know much about SEO. We were just like, I think I can write. That's it. And it's actually, people think, oh, but who's going to read my stuff? Nobody knows about my business yet. Nobody comes to my website. At the beginning, I found that to be such a liberating thing. It was a huge benefit because I could just, when I worked at Fortune 500 companies, it would take months to approve a piece of content. You had to get stakeholders in. This person had to provide feedback. You had to get approval here and there. It was so slow. And with this little known website at the time where nobody was coming, we had almost zero traffic except maybe my mom. I knew didn't matter what I was writing. And so I would just, whatever came to me that day, I would say, oh, yeah, let me educate people on this one little thing. And I'd write an article with no thought about SEO or how it would rank. I was just really trying to speak to another human on the other side of the screen and teach them a little bit more about what this was all about. And that's really where it started. We started for many months just blogging, nowhere else, just blogging. And every time we blogged, I might post it on my own Facebook account. That was it. That was the extent of it. We sent out a few newsletters here and there. But then over time, as we started to get the hang of the blogging, we said, okay, well, what's next? Then we started to build into videos. And then eventually, then we did podcasts. And so now we have this kind of omnipresence, as you mentioned, but it didn't come all at once. It came very intentionally, bit by bit, based on what we were comfortable with and what we knew to start with.
That's such good advice because so many business owners try to do it all at once and even come to me and say, I want this and I want this and I want this. And Usually then they get the price tag and they're like, oh.
Right.
But that is still a challenge that we're constantly
Mhm.
navigating. So, if you will, share with me now how your blogs are doing, because there's this narrative out there that nobody blogs anymore. Nobody has time to read. Blogs aren't working, like whatever,
Mhm.
along that train
Yeah,
of thought. And yes, there is this big push toward audio and video, but I think blogs are still really important. So, being the business owner, and I know you get to see your metrics and everything, how are the blogs performing now? Is that still a good
great
thing to do?
question. Yeah. So for us, and we've measured our metrics every year since almost the beginning, because what you don't measure, you can't manage. And so from the very beginning, we were measuring how many people were signing up to what we call our Good Egg Investor Club, how many people were signing up for that, and then of those people, how many people were following through to invest. In the early days, before we had much of a web presence, and certainly before we had any knowledge of how SEO works, our main leads were coming through two sources. One is being a guest on other people's podcasts, and second was referrals.
Hmm.
And so we thought, well, this is great. Once we get an opportunity to go out and tell our story, people resonate with it and people come and learn more about us. So that's great. Second was the referrals. And we thought, great, that's telling us that we're treating people right. They're referring
Mhm.
people to us.
Mhm.
Now, in the early days, almost nobody came in through web traffic because people couldn't find us. Even if they were searching for us, we weren't ranking for anything. But over time, as we built up that knowledge and we built up that content stack, then we started to rank, not for everything, but one keyword here, one keyword there. And slowly it started to overtake the other sources. And so now I would say probably 40% of our investors come through a random Google search that they did. And they find a blog post that we wrote. Sometimes a blog post we wrote 3 years ago is still very relevant, and they go through, they read that, and they say, oh, this is really interesting. I never knew about this. And they click on another link and they go deeper into something else that we've written. Or they may click and go to our YouTube channel. And so we find that those blog posts, they're like fish hooks out there. And each one is an opportunity for us to put a signpost out into the world and get somebody's attention. Not necessarily that that one blog post will be the one thing that converts them, but it gets their attention, brings them to us, and then we can show them all the other things. And then eventually they get in deep enough that they build that trust and they want to move forward.
Yeah. So let me ask you, is this like a 6-year journey to the 40% finding, or what's the timeline on that? Do you know?
Yeah, I think it was in 2019. So about a year into the business, we had written probably, I think we had written roughly one blog post a week. So we had probably 50, 60 blog posts at that time. And I said, but these aren't ranking. Why are we writing these if nobody's seeing them except the people who we're sending emails to? That's a great value too, and we also want people to find us through these blog posts. So then I took time that summer of 2019, so about a year into the business, to really dig in and try to figure out this SEO thing. And it's not easy.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, there's so much stuff out there. I watched a lot of YouTube videos. I tried to talk to some people. I tried to read some blog posts. Finally got a little bit of understanding about it. Certainly don't have didn't have the tools or the team that I have now, but I took it upon myself just to take a few of our blog posts, I think like three or four blog posts, and try to rework them with
Mhm.
these new things that I was learning.
Mhm.
And that's it. I didn't change the way that I was writing new blog posts. I was just like, let me just test this with three or four blog posts. And lo and behold, over the next few months, those started to rank. It was a process. SEO is a long game. You got to have patience, but they started to rank. And that was our proof of concept. And so we started to pay more attention to SEO because what I love about SEO, unlike something like paid ads, for
Mm.
example,
Mm-hmm.
paid ads is you pay for it, it comes. You stop paying for it, it stops coming.
Yeah.
SEO is an asset to your business. If you invest in it, it does take more time to build up, but once you do, even if you stop working on it, it's still working. And if you were ever to sell your business, those rankings are an asset to your business.
Yeah.
And so over time, we invested more time, more energy, we got partners, we got more intentional about our SEO. And so I would say probably around year 3, that's when we had built up enough to where the scales started to tip in the favor of SEO.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that is unfortunately the trap that most business owners fall in is ads, even social media posts. Those are all of these quick hit kind of feel good. I got 30 likes on my post type of
Yeah.
thing that
Yeah.
they mean nothing because that post is gone and you can't Google an Instagram post, right? Like it
Right.
just doesn't, they don't connect. It doesn't work that
Yeah.
way. And I think so many business owners start out focused on building the social media presence or running ads or doing these things that essentially expire. Rather than if we could invest and think long term about what's going to last even after I stop doing it. It's kind
Mhm.
of like an
Yeah.
investing thing, honestly.
Yeah.
You put your money in something that works for you
Mhm.
long
Yep.
term. And even when you stop focusing on that thing, it's still working rather than these kind of short term, quick hit. You might get some fast results, but it's not going to help your business over the long haul. So that's a really good long term, long form content piece of advice that you just shared with us. And I would venture to say that, YouTube works very similarly, podcasts work very similarly. People tend to get frustrated in like 6 months, like nobody's subscribing to my YouTube channel, but it's like, this is basically just like SEO. Like you have to give it the time.
And we have podcasts that we were featured guests on in 2019 that still generate leads for us today.
Wow.
And so it works, you're getting yourself out there, and those are evergreen. They live forever and they're
Mm-hmm.
always out there. And if you're talking about things that are always relevant, then people
Mm-hmm.
will continue to find their way to you.
So, something that's kind of underlying that we haven't mentioned outright is that I probably learned a lot about outsourcing from you. And whether you know that or not, but I paid attention. I watched. We kind of mentioned that I had gotten to see some of the back end of your business, which I'm so thankful for that experience and your faith in me at that time. I was a very, very new freelancer at that time. And I saw you making moves in how you treated me and how you treated other freelancers or how you were outsourcing different pieces of the business. I learned a lot. So, what other advice would you have for business owners as far as getting help, whether that is outsourcing or hiring, or what is your experience and advice there?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked this question because this is a piece of advice I love to give and people hate to hear.
Oh,
And here's what it is. People always want to hire out for the things that they don't want to do, that they never have time for. Social media is a perfect example. People are like, I don't have time for social media. I'm just going to hire that out, get that off my plate. I don't have to feel bad about it anymore. Somebody else can do it. And we've done that before too. I've been guilty of this. We did that at one point, and I can tell you it was money that we threw down the drain. And here's what I tell people now is unless you have figured out a way to do it in your business yourself, or somebody on your team, and you have that proof of concept, you know that it's working, do not pay to outsource it, because nobody who you outsource it to will treat it like they're not going to treat it like their business, because it's not their business. They're going to treat it like a task to be checked off a list. And so, what I always tell people is, first, try to crack the nut internally. See if you can figure it out by just watching some YouTube videos or Googling it, seeing if you can figure it out just on a very small scale. I mentioned I did the 3 or 4 blog posts. That didn't take that much time. I cracked the nut and I realized, wait, this can actually work. And that's what gave us the confidence to then put more dollars toward that. And also, when we outsource that piece, we knew enough to be able to communicate with people who we were partnering with, and to know if, one, they were pulling one over on us, and two, to help guide them to what we saw was already successful. And so that's what I would say is, don't outsource until you at least have some grasp of it and have seen some success internally.
Amazing. Yeah, because even hiring a VA, you have to be able to tell the VA what you want done. They can't
Yeah.
just step. And
Right.
so many people are missing that piece. Like, oh, I'm
Yes.
drowning. I need a VA. Well, what do you want the
Right.
VA to do? Oh, I
Yeah.
don't know.
Right.
She can't help you
Yep.
then.
Right. Right. Yeah. So always, start with what you're like. If you're a really busy entrepreneur,
Mhm.
start looking at what you're already doing, not the things that you haven't done yet, but start looking at the things that you're already doing, the repeatable things, and see if you can offload some of that to a VA, because you already know how to do it. You just have to do a little bit of work to systematize it and to hand it off so that somebody can step into your shoes, but you already have that process down. And then that frees you up, because you're an entrepreneur. You create things where there was nothing before. That's your strong suit. And so then you can pivot to another area of your business where something hasn't been created yet. And you can get in there and create something. And then once you've created it, then you hand that off, and on and on.
I love that. Okay, so we are going to wrap up soon, but before we do, I want to hear a bit about your podcast and the thought behind whether this is in a marketing arm for the business, or how is this going to be cohesive with our business. And I'm sure it has morphed and changed along the way because you've been doing it for quite a while. So, just quickly, if you will, share with me that journey and what that looks like for you now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we hesitated to start our own podcast for a long time. We were probably on over 100 podcasts as guests before we actually started our own podcast, because we thought, why would we pay for this to do it ourselves when we could just do it for free and just be on other people's podcasts? And yes, there is a value to being on other people's podcasts, and we still do that to this day, but it's actually two different reasons
Mhm.
why you would be on somebody else's podcast versus having your own podcast. And that took us
Mhm.
time to parse out and figure out. When you're on somebody else's podcast, you get to fish in their pond. You get to talk to their audience and leverage their existing reputation with their audience, which is great. But it's just a flash in the pan. It's one episode out of hundreds. And so you might get attention for a little bit, and then it passes because they're creating more and more episodes. And the listeners are trusting that host.
Mhm.
They're not necessarily trusting you. When you have your own podcast, you are the Oprah.
Yeah.
You are the voice of authority, and you get to shape the conversation how you want. And you're really connecting with your listeners on a deeper level and showing them. And again, this goes back to the trust we were trying to build with our investors so that they
Mhm.
could wire us their money. We are here every week after week. We're sending newsletters every week. We're on a podcast every week. We're here with you. We're not going anywhere. You know where to find us.
Thank you for sharing that. Before we go, will you tell us where people can find you, follow you, and if there's any specific exciting thing coming up?
Oh, yes. So, the best place to go if you're curious about passive investing or just want to learn more about real estate and financial freedom, you can go to our website. It's goodegginvestments.com. And if you want to reach out to me personally, you can do that at Annie at goodegginvestments.com. As far as what's coming down the pipe for the business, one of the more exciting things that we've launched in recent months is, for a long time, our opportunities were only available to accredited investors at $50,000 a pop, which is a very small subset of the population. And for a long time, we wanted to grow towards being able to be more accessible to more people. And so over the last year, we've really built out the non accredited opportunities within our suite of offerings. So we now offer opportunities on every deal that we do for non accredited investors at $10,000 or sometimes even less to give as many people as possible an opportunity to build wealth for their families. So that's something that we're very proud of, and we'll continue to grow and to bring more, not just real estate content, but also how to live a life by design, how to reach financial freedom. Those are things that I'm most excited about.
Yeah, yeah, that is so exciting. And I've seen you through that transition as well. I remember thinking like, oh, like I want to get in on this, but
One
I'm not
day.
there. And then now I'm like, oh, this feels possible. So,
Yes.
congratulations. That is so exciting and truly a tangible piece where the rest of us can really feel the growth of your business because now this is available. So
Yes.
that's awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
Ah, thank you so much for having me. This has been such a joy and a great full circle moment after all the work that we've done together and the growth that we've each
Yeah,
seen in our businesses. So, such a pleasure. Thank you.
yeah, I agree. Thank you.